My son said I could live in their basement if I cooked and cleaned. His wife handed me a schedule. So I smiled and started planning my exit. Stay with me. What would you have done in my place? The phone call came at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the same hour I used to pick up my grandson from school before they decided I was too unreliable for such responsibilities. I was stirring instant coffee in my studio apartment kitchen, a space so small I could touch both walls with outstretched arms, when my lawyer's voice crackled through my ancient flip phone. Darlene, I have news about your aunt's estate. Aunt Maggie. The family ghost who'd vanished to Oregon 30 years ago after some long-forgotten feud with my mother. I'd sent her Christmas cards out of duty, never expecting replies that never came. She'd died 6 months ago, and I'd only learned about it through a brief clinical letter from her attorney. There's been a complication with the will, he continued. Could you come in tomorrow? I agreed, though I couldn't imagine what complication a childless woman with no assets could leave behind. Maggie had worked as a seamstress her whole life. What could there possibly be to complicate? I hung up and returned to my coffee, staring out the grimy window at the parking lot of my subsidized housing complex. At 62, this was what my life had become. Instant everything, secondhand furniture, and the constant hum of my upstairs neighbor's television bleeding through paper-thin walls. The retirement fund I'd built over 37 years as a medical billing specialist had evaporated when Enron-style fraud consumed my company's pension plan. My savings had drained paying for my late husband's cancer treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. Now I survived on Social Security and whatever odd jobs I could find. Cleaning houses for women half my age who spoke to me like I was invisible. My phone buzzed. A text from my son Isaac. Can we talk? Important. My stomach clenched. Isaac only called when he needed something, and lately, those calls had become more frequent. His contracting business was struggling, his wife Violet was pregnant with their third child, and their mortgage was underwater. I'd already given them the last of my emergency fund 6 months ago, money I couldn't afford to lose. I called him back. Mom. His voice carried that particular strain I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant he was about to turn my world upside down while making it sound like a favor. I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm. What is it, Isaac? Violet and I have been talking. With the baby coming and everything. He paused and I could hear Violet's voice in the background, sharp and insistent. We know things have been tight for you since Dad died. The apartment, the bills. We see how you're struggling. I wasn't struggling. I was surviving. There was a difference, though I doubted he understood it. We want to help, he continued. We're offering you the basement. You'd have your own entrance, your own space. And with Violet not working after the baby comes, she could use help with the house, cooking, that kind of thing. It's perfect. Perfect. The word hung in the air like smoke from a fire I couldn't yet see. The basement, I repeated. It's furnished. Well, mostly. There's a bed down there, and we could set up a little kitchenette. You'd save a fortune on rent, and we'd all be family under one roof again. In the background, I heard Violet's voice more clearly now. She better be willing to cook and clean if she's living here rent-free. I'm not running a charity. My son's voice returned, artificially bright. What do you say, Mom? It's a win-win. I closed my eyes, feeling something cold settle in my chest. This was their generosity. A basement room in exchange for becoming their live-in help. The woman who had changed their diapers, worked double shifts to pay for Isaac's soccer cleats and college textbooks, who had sacrificed her own dreams so they could chase theirs, was now being offered shelter in return for servitude. I lost my retirement, I said quietly, testing the words. I know, Mom. That's why we're trying to help. But he didn't flinch. There was no shock in his voice, no outrage at the injustice of it, just pragmatic acceptance that his mother had become a problem to be managed. Let me think about it, I said. Don't think too long. We need to know by the weekend. Violet's already planning the nursery and we need to figure out logistics. After I hung up, I sat in my threadbare armchair, the only piece of furniture I'd brought from the house Simu and I had shared for 28 years, and stared at the water stain on my ceiling. It looked like a bird with broken wings. The basement, where they stored Christmas decorations and out-of-season clothes, where the washer and dryer hummed through the night and the windows were too small to let in proper light. where I would become the help, invisible until needed, dismissed when convenient. I thought about Violet's words. She better cook and clean, not we'd love to have her help, or it would be nice to spend more time together. Just the cold calculation of what services I could provide in exchange for a roof over my head. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing closer. I could taste the metallic tang of humiliation in my mouth, the flavor of a pride being systematically stripped away. This was what I'd become in their eyes. Not a mother, not a woman who'd built a life and raised children and loved a husband through sickness and death. Just a burden to be managed, a mouth to feed in exchange for unpaid labor. But what choice did I have? My lease was up in 2 months, and they'd already raised the rent beyond what I could afford. The waiting list for cheaper housing stretched years into the future. I was too old for most jobs, too young for senior housing, too proud to ask for charity from anyone else. I picked up the phone to call Isaac back, to accept their generous offer, when my doorbell rang. A courier stood in the hallway holding an envelope marked Urgent Legal Documents. Darlene Rudolph? I signed for it with shaking hands, though I couldn't say if it was from nerves or the cold draft that perpetually swept through the building. Inside was a letter from my aunt's attorney, asking me to come in first thing in the morning rather than waiting until our scheduled afternoon appointment. Time-sensitive matters regarding the estate, it read. Please bring identification and proof of familial relationship. I set the letter on my kitchen counter next to the phone and stared at both. 2 conversations waiting. 2 paths stretching ahead of me. Call Isaac back and accept the basement. Or wait until morning and see what Aunt Maggie, the woman who'd disappeared from our family like smoke, had left behind. The water stain on my ceiling caught the last light from my window, and for just a moment, it looked less like a broken bird and more like wings spreading wide, preparing for flight. I left the phone untouched and went to bed early, my dreams filled with basements and legal documents and the sound of Violet's voice echoing through corridors I couldn't escape. She better cook and clean. She better cook and clean. But when I woke at dawn, something had shifted inside me. Maybe it was the morning light streaming through my small window. Or maybe it was the simple act of choosing to wait, to see what other options existed beyond the basement of my son's conditional charity. I dressed carefully in my best outfit, a brown-blue suit I'd worn to job interviews and funerals, and prepared to meet whatever Aunt Maggie had left behind. The law office smelled like leather and old money, a scent I'd forgotten existed until I stepped through the mahogany doors at 8:30 sharp. Liam Lee, Esquire, was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of earnest face that made you trust him before he spoke a word. Mrs. Rudolph, thank you for coming in early. He gestured to a chair across from his desk, which was large enough to land a small plane on. Coffee? I accepted, though my hands were already shaking enough without caffeine. He poured from a silver service that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I'll get straight to the point, he said, settling behind his desk with a thick folder. Your Aunt Maggie left you everything. Everything, I repeated, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. She lived in a studio apartment. I sent her Christmas cards to a P.O. box. Liam smiled, the kind of smile that suggested I was about to have my entire understanding of reality reorganized. Mrs. Rudolph, your aunt was, how should I put this, exceptionally private about her financial affairs. She lived modestly by choice, not necessity. He opened the folder and spread several documents across the desk like he was dealing cards. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds. The numbers swam before my eyes. Too many zeros to process. The total estate, after taxes and fees, comes to approximately $3.5 million. The coffee cup slipped from my fingers, crashing against the saucer. Hot liquid splashed across the legal documents, and I lurched forward to clean it up, apologizing, my face burning with embarrassment. Please don't worry about it, Liam said gently, moving the papers to safety. I imagine this is quite a shock. $3.5 million. The number felt like a foreign language. I'd never seen that much money written down, much less associated with my name. How? I whispered. Your aunt was brilliant with investments. She started with a small inheritance from your grandmother, money she invested in tech stocks in the 80s, then diversified into real estate and emerging markets. She lived on perhaps 5% of her annual returns and reinvested everything else. She was, in essence, a millionaire several times over who chose to live like she was surviving on Social Security. I thought of Maggie, quiet, forgettable Maggie who'd worked at the same tailor shop for 40 years, who'd never married, never had children, never seemed to want anything more than her small, invisible life. All that time, she'd been playing a different game entirely. "Why me?" I asked. We barely spoke. I didn't even know she was sick. Liam's expression softened. "She left you a letter, said she'd been watching from a distance, knew about your husband's illness, your financial struggles. She admired how you handled yourself with dignity even when everything fell apart." He handed me an envelope, cream-colored and heavy, with my name written in Maggie's careful script. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Dear Darlene, by the time you read this, you'll know about the money. I suspect you're wondering why I chose you over the others. Isaac, Simu Jr. The grandchildren. The answer is simple. You're the only one who never asked me for anything. I've watched our family from my self-imposed exile. I've seen how they treat you since Simu's death, how they speak to you, how they've forgotten that you were once a woman with dreams of your own, not just a wife and mother whose value is measured by what she can provide. This money comes with no strings, no expectations. But I hope you'll use it to remember who you were before you became everyone else's solution to their problems. Don't tell them about the inheritance immediately. Watch. See how they behave when they think you have nothing left to offer but free labor. Then decide what they deserve to know. The money is yours, but the wisdom of how to use it, that's something you already possess. You just forgot it for a while. With love and respect, Maggie." I read the letter 3 times before I could speak. When I looked up, Liam was watching me with the kind of patience that suggested he'd seen this scene before. "She was smart," I said finally. "Exceptionally so. The question now is, what would you like to do?" What did I want to do? 24 hours ago, I'd been preparing to accept a basement room in exchange for becoming unpaid help. Now I had enough money to buy Isaac's house 10 times over. The reversal was so complete it felt like a different kind of dream, the kind you wake up from disappointed. But this was real. The papers spread across Liam's desk, the numbers with their impossible zeros, the weight of Maggie's letter in my hands. All of it was real. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Before we make any transfers or announcements?" "Of course. The money has been sitting in managed accounts for 6 months already. It can wait as long as you need." I walked out of that office feeling like I was floating 6 inches above the sidewalk. The world looked different when you had options. Sharper, more vivid, full of possibilities that hadn't existed an hour before. My phone buzzed. A text from Isaac. "Mom, we need that answer about the basement. Violet wants to start moving furniture this weekend." I stared at the message, remembering Maggie's words. "Don't tell them about the inheritance immediately. Watch. See how they behave when they think you have nothing left to offer but free labor." Instead of calling Isaac back, I went home and sat in my threadbare armchair, looking around my tiny apartment with new eyes. Everything here, the second-hand furniture, the water stain on the ceiling, the narrow view of the parking lot, all of it was suddenly temporary, not because I had to leave, but because I could choose to leave. The difference was everything. That evening, I called Isaac. "I'll take the basement," I said, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. "Really? That's great, Mom. Violet will be so relieved. She's been stressed about managing everything with the baby coming. I'll need a few weeks to settle my affairs here. Give notice, pack my things. No rush. Well, actually, we were hoping you could move in by next weekend. The sooner you're there, the more help Violet can get setting up the nursery. Of course. Not take your time adjusting to this major life change, or we know this must be difficult for you. Just the immediate expectation of my services. I'll see what I can do," I said. After I hung up, I made another call to a storage unit facility across town. I rented a small unit under my maiden name and paid for 6 months in advance with cash. Over the next week, I moved my most precious belongings there. Photographs, my grandmother's china, Simu's books, my own collection of medical journals from the years when I dreamed of going back to school to become a nurse practitioner. things I didn't want Isaac and Violet going through, things that belonged to the woman I'd been before I became someone's burden. I kept only what I'd need for the performance I was about to give, the role of grateful mother accepting charity from her generous son, a few changes of clothes, basic toiletries, and one photograph of Simu and me on our wedding day, young and certain that love was enough to build a life on. The night before I moved into Isaac's basement, I sat in my empty apartment drinking wine from a plastic cup and reading Maggie's letter one more time. "Watch," she'd written. "See how they behave when they think you have nothing left to offer but free labor." I was about to become a student of my own family, studying them like specimens under a microscope, learning exactly who they were when they thought I had no other options. The water stain on my ceiling caught the last light from the parking lot, and I realized I wouldn't miss it. Not the stain, not the apartment, not the life I'd been living here. That life had been about survival. What came next would be about something else entirely. I raised my plastic cup in a toast to Maggie, to the aunt who'd watched from the shadows and left me more than money. She'd left me power. The power to choose who deserved my presence, my energy, my love. The power to discover what my son and daughter-in-law really thought of me when they believed I had nowhere else to go. Tomorrow, I would move into their basement and begin my education. And when I'd learned enough, when I'd seen the full measure of their generosity and respect, I would decide what they earned in return. The empty apartment felt full of possibility as I turned off the lights for the last time. The basement smelled like mildew and broken dreams. As I descended the narrow wooden steps carrying my single suitcase, I cataloged every detail with the precision of a scientist entering a new laboratory. The ceiling was so low that Isaac had to duck when he showed me around, pointing out amenities like a tour guide eager to close a deal. "Here's your bed," he said, gesturing to a twin mattress pushed against the far wall. It was covered with a comforter I recognized from his college dorm room, faded blue with cigarette burns along one edge. "And Violet set up this little area for you." The little area consisted of a card table with a hot plate, a mini fridge that hummed like a dying animal, and a coffee maker that looked older than my marriage. 3 mismatched plates sat in a plastic dish drainer next to a single cup and saucer, the kind you'd find at a thrift store marked down for quick sale. "The bathroom's through there," Isaac continued, opening a door that revealed a toilet and shower stall, so small I'd have to back out to change my mind. "You'll share it with the laundry room, but Violet does wash on Tuesdays and Saturdays, so just work around that." Work around that. Even my bodily functions were expected to accommodate Violet's schedule. "It's perfect," I said, setting my suitcase on the bed. The springs protested with a sound like breaking bones. "Great. Violet's making dinner upstairs. She's excited to have help with everything." He paused at the bottom of the stairs, and I caught something in his expression. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction at a problem neatly solved. "She left a list of things you could start on tomorrow. Nothing too demanding." After he left, I sat on the bed and surveyed my new kingdom. The single window was at ground level, offering a view of Violet's herb garden and the neighbor's garbage cans. The walls were unfinished concrete, painted white in optimistic strokes that couldn't quite hide the dampness underneath. A spider had built an elaborate web in the corner where the ceiling met the wall, and I watched it for a long moment, admiring its patience and precision. I was beginning to understand both qualities would be essential. The list Violet had left was propped against the coffee maker, written in her careful teacher's handwriting. "Morning. Coffee. Ready by 6 a.m. Isaac leaves early. Breakfast for kids. Cereal toast is fine. Walk Alex. Dog by 7 a.m. Tidy kitchen after breakfast. Grocery shopping Mondays. List on fridge. Dinner prep. Nothing fancy. Just family meals. Light housekeeping as needed. Bedtime routine for Anna and Norman. Stories. Baths." At the bottom, she'd added in different ink, "Darlene, so grateful for your help. This will be such a blessing for our family." I folded the list carefully and placed it in my purse next to Maggie's letter. 2 documents that would help me remember exactly who I was dealing with and why I was here. My first dinner upstairs was an education in family dynamics I'd somehow missed during all those holiday visits. Violet presided over the table like a general commanding troops, directing conversations, correcting the children's posture, managing every detail of the meal with exhausting precision. Darlene, could you grab the salt? She asked, without looking up from cutting Norman's chicken into precise squares. And maybe refill Isaac's water? I noticed he's almost empty. Anna, 7 years old with Simu's dark eyes and my stubborn chin, looked at me curiously. Grandma, why are you living in our basement? Anna, that's not polite, Violet said sharply. Grandma is helping our family by staying here. But why can't she have the guest room? Because the guest room is for the baby's nursery. We've discussed this. Isaac cleared his throat. Mom's excited to be closer to family, aren't you, Mom? All eyes turned to me. Anna's curious. Norman's disinterested as he picked at his food. Violet's watchful. Isaac's expectant. I felt like an actor who'd forgotten her lines in the middle of a crucial scene. I'm very grateful, I said, the words tasting like sawdust. See? Violet smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd just solved a complex equation. It's perfect for everyone. After dinner, I offered to clean up while Violet supervised the children's homework, and Isaac disappeared into his home office to catch up on estimates. I stood at their kitchen sink washing dishes with water hot enough to strip paint, and through the window I could see into the Hendersons' house next door. Amelia Cook was about my age, recently widowed, and I watched her moving through her kitchen with the confidence of someone who owned every inch of her space. When I returned to the basement, I found a new addition to my domain, a baby monitor on the card table, already crackling with static. Just in case the kids need anything during the night, Violet called down the stairs. I'm so tired with the pregnancy, and Isaac's such a heavy sleeper. So now I was the night shift too. The next morning, I was up at 5:30, coffee brewing by the time Isaac stumbled into the kitchen in his work clothes. He nodded his thanks but didn't speak until he was halfway through his first cup. This is nice, he said finally, having you here. It feels like when I was a kid and you'd have breakfast ready before school. For just a moment, his voice carried a warmth I remembered from when he was small, when he'd wrap his arms around my legs and declare he was never leaving home because he loved me too much. But then Violet appeared, her pregnant belly preceding her into the kitchen like an announcement. Darlene, did you walk Alex yet? He's been whining by the door for 10 minutes. I hadn't even finished making their breakfast, but I took the leash without complaint. Alex, a golden retriever with more energy than sense, dragged me through the neighborhood at a pace that made my knees ache. We passed Amelia Cook's house, and I saw her through her window, drinking coffee at her own kitchen table while reading what looked like a real estate magazine. By the time I returned, Isaac had left for work, and Violet was instructing Anna and Norman on their morning routines while simultaneously packing lunches and checking homework folders. Darlene, after you drop them at school, could you stop by the grocery store? I added a few things to the list. Oh, and the dry cleaning needs to be picked up, and if you have time, could you swing by Target? I need diapers for Norman's accidents and some storage bins for the nursery. 3 stops. Before 9 a.m. On foot since I didn't have access to a car and Violet would need hers for her prenatal appointment. Of course, I said. That afternoon, while reorganizing Violet's spice cabinet according to her detailed specifications, I heard her on the phone in the living room. No, it's working out perfectly, she was saying to someone, her sister maybe, or her mother. She's so grateful to have somewhere to go. And honestly, it's like having live-in help. I haven't had to think about dinner or grocery shopping in days. A pause, then laughter. I know, right? And she actually seems to enjoy it. I think she was lonely in that awful apartment. This gives her purpose. Purpose. The word settled in my chest like a cold stone. That evening, after I'd bathed the children and read them 3 stories and tucked them into beds with sheets I'd changed and pillowcases I'd ironed, I sat in my basement kingdom and opened my laptop, one of the few possessions I'd brought that Violet hadn't found a use for. I spent 2 hours researching women-focused startup incubators, reading about successful programs that provided funding and mentorship for older women entering the tech sector. I made notes about business models, organizational structures, the kinds of companies that emerged from these programs. By the time I closed the laptop, I had the skeleton of an idea forming, something that would honor Maggie's gift while creating exactly the kind of purpose Violet thought I needed. But first, I needed to complete my research, to document exactly how my son and daughter-in-law behaved when they believed they held all the power in our relationship. I pulled out a small notebook I'd tucked behind my pillow and began writing. Day 3. Violet asked me to reorganize her entire pantry, then criticized the way I'd arranged the canned goods. That's not how I do it, Darlene. Isaac watched TV while I folded 3 loads of his laundry. Day 4. Anna asked if I was sad living in the basement. Before I could answer, Violet said, "Grandma's happy to help our family, aren't you?" Anna looked confused. So did I. Day 5. Violet's friend came for coffee. Heard Violet say, "It's amazing what you can get used to when you don't have other options." Each entry was a small wound, but also evidence. Proof of who they really were when they thought I had nowhere else to go. When they believed my love for them meant I'd accept any treatment they offered. By the end of my second week in the basement, I had filled 12 pages with observations. Small cruelties disguised as family dynamics. Thoughtlessness presented as natural order. A systematic reduction of my humanity to its most useful functions. But I had something else too. Absolute clarity about what I was going to do with Maggie's gift. And absolute certainty that Isaac and Violet had earned whatever came next. The spider in the corner had caught something substantial in her web. A beetle that had wandered too confidently into her domain. I watched her wrap it carefully, preserving it for later consumption. Patience and precision, I thought. The spider understood both. 3 weeks into my basement residency, I was hanging Violet's delicate washables on the backyard line when I heard crying from the cookhouse next door. Through the chain-link fence, I could see Amelia Cook sitting on her back porch, shoulders shaking, a letter clutched in her hands. "Amelia?" I called softly. "Are you all right?" She looked up, startled, then wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Oh, Darlene, I didn't see you there." She attempted a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Just having a moment. I set down the laundry basket. In my old life, I would have offered a platitude and returned to my chores. But something about her posture, the way she held herself like she was trying to disappear, reminded me too much of my own reflection lately. "Can I come over?" Amelia's kitchen was everything I remembered a real home could be. Warm yellow walls, photographs of family gatherings, a coffee pot that had been brewing coffee instead of instant for decades. She poured me a cup without asking, the kind of automatic hospitality that comes from years of making people feel welcome. "I got a letter from my daughter," she said, settling across from me at her kitchen table. "She wants me to sell the house." "Your daughter lives in California, doesn't she?" "San Diego, married to a software engineer, 2 kids I see twice a year." Amelia's voice carried the particular exhaustion of a mother whose sacrifices had been forgotten. "She says the house is too big for me now that Liam's gone. Says I should move closer to them, into one of those senior communities." I sipped my coffee and waited. Sometimes the most important conversations started with the things people weren't saying. "She's probably right," Amelia continued. "The house is big, 4 bedrooms for 1 person. But Liam and we built this place. I know every creak in the floorboards, every place where the paint needs touching up, the garden out back. I planted every flower, every herb. This is my life. What does your gut tell you?" She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "My gut says she's more interested in her inheritance than my happiness. The real estate market's hot right now. This place is worth twice what we paid for it." I thought about Violet upstairs, probably timing how long I'd been away from my duties. About the list of chores waiting on my card table. About the baby monitor that let them summon me like a servant. "Amelia," I said carefully, "what if you didn't have to choose between keeping your house and having financial security?" She looked at me with the kind of skepticism that comes from a lifetime of learning that solutions are usually more complicated than they appear. "What do you mean?" I took a breath, feeling like I was stepping off a cliff. "What if there was a way to keep your house, increase your income, and invest in something meaningful at the same time?" Over the next hour, I told Amelia about an idea that had been growing in my mind since my first night in the basement. A women's tech incubator focused specifically on women over 60, women with experience, wisdom, and dreams they'd put on hold for decades. Women who understood perseverance because they'd survived husbands' deaths, children's ingratitude, and a world that had taught them their value decreased with every birthday. "We'd need a headquarters," I said. "Somewhere with space for offices, meeting rooms, a small residence for women who might need temporary housing while getting their businesses off the ground." Amelia's eyes had grown wider with each detail. You're talking about a lot of money. I have access to startup capital. The question is whether you'd be interested in partnering with me. It was a calculated risk, revealing part of my hand. But sitting in Amelia's kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of a life lived fully and authentically, I realized I was starving for real conversation with someone who wasn't measuring my worth by what I could do for them. Darlene, Amelia said slowly, where exactly are you getting startup capital? You're living in your son's basement. So I told her about Maggie, about the inheritance, the lawyer's office, the decision to let my family reveal their true nature before I revealed mine. Amelia listened without interruption, her coffee growing cold in her hands. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You're testing them, she said finally. I'm learning about them. There's a difference. And what have you learned? I thought about the past 3 weeks. About Violet introducing me to her friends as Isaac's mother who's helping us out while we adjust to the new baby. About Isaac asking me to iron his work shirts and then leaving them in a pile on the dryer for 2 days. About Anna asking if I was too poor to have my own house, and Violet shushing her before I could answer. I've learned that they see kindness as weakness and desperation as opportunity. They've turned my love for them into a currency they can spend without consequence. Amelia nodded slowly. And now? Now I'm going to build something that matters, with women who understand what it means to be underestimated. That evening, I helped Violet prepare dinner while she detailed her vision for the nursery. A room that had previously been my potential guest room before the basement was deemed more appropriate for my station. I'm thinking lavender and gray, she said, chopping vegetables with the efficiency of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Gender neutral, but still sophisticated. Pinterest has these amazing ideas for wall treatments. Sounds lovely, I murmured, stirring the sauce she'd assigned me to monitor. Oh, and Darlene? I have my baby shower next weekend. I'll need you to help with setup and serving. Nothing too complicated, just making sure everyone has drinks, clearing plates, that kind of thing. Of course. Great. I've invited about 30 women. It should be fun. Fun for her, maybe? For me, it would be another performance in the role of grateful family help. But it would also be something else, an opportunity to observe how Violet presented our living arrangement to her friends, to hear in real time how she explained my presence in their basement. That night, I sat on my narrow bed with my laptop balanced on my knees, researching legal structures for nonprofit organizations. I read about board compositions, mission statements, funding strategies. I made lists of potential partners, women I'd known throughout my career who'd been pushed aside, overlooked, dismissed as past their prime. Women like Dr. Janice Carlson, who'd been forced into early retirement when her tech company restructured and eliminated everyone over 55. Like Ruth Chappelle, who developed 3 software innovations for her employer and watched younger men get the patents and promotions. Like Josephine Woodard, who'd built her husband's medical practice from nothing and been left with nothing when he divorced her for his 28-year-old nurse. Women with decades of experience, networks of contacts, and the kind of strategic thinking that comes from navigating a world designed to diminish them. Around midnight, I opened a new document and began typing. Silver Sage Ventures, a women's technology incubator mission, to provide funding, mentorship, and resources for women aged 60+ pursuing technology entrepreneurship, with special focus on practical innovations that solve real-world problems. Core values: wisdom over youth, experience over assumptions, collaboration over competition. Initial investment: $2. 5 million. I saved the document and closed the laptop, feeling something shift inside my chest. A loosening of pressure I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. Upstairs, I could hear Violet and Isaac talking in their bedroom, their voices carrying through the thin ceiling. She seems to be adjusting well, Isaac was saying. Better than I expected, honestly. I was worried she'd be one of those bitter old women who complain about everything, but she's actually grateful. Mom's always been practical. Thank God. Can you imagine if she'd been high maintenance about this? We're doing her such a huge favor. A huge favor. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, thinking about that phrase. In their minds, they were generous benefactors graciously solving my problems. The fact that their solution required me to surrender my autonomy, my privacy, and my dignity was simply the reasonable price of their charity. They had no idea they were housing a millionaire who was documenting their every kindness for future reference. The baby monitor crackled to life, Norman having a bad dream, calling for his parents. I waited to see if they would respond to their own child's distress. After 5 minutes of Norman's intermittent crying, I climbed the stairs and padded into his room. He was sitting up in bed, disoriented and scared, his dark hair sticking up in all directions. "Bad dream, sweetheart?" He nodded and reached for me. I sat on the edge of his bed and held him until his breathing steadied, humming the same song I'd hummed to Isaac 30 years ago. Norman's small body was warm and trusting against my chest, and for a moment I remembered why I'd agreed to this arrangement. Not for Isaac and Violet, but for these children who deserved to know their grandmother. When I tucked him back in, he grabbed my hand. "Grandma? Are you sad?" The question hit me like a physical blow. This 7-year-old had noticed what his parents had missed, or chosen to ignore. "Sometimes," I said honestly, "but not when I'm with you. Will you always live in our basement?" "I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I'll always be your grandmother, no matter where I live." He seemed satisfied with that answer and drifted back to sleep. I returned to the basement, but instead of going to bed, I opened my laptop again and added a new section to my business plan. Educational initiative. Intergenerational mentorship programs, connecting older women entrepreneurs with young people interested in technology and innovation. Norman's question had reminded me that this wasn't just about revenge or justice or even building a business empire. It was about showing the next generation that women don't become invisible when they turn 60. That wisdom and experience are assets, not liabilities. That grandmothers can be more than basement dwellers grateful for scraps of their children's attention. The spider in her corner had finished with her beetle and was spinning new threads, expanding her web with methodical precision. Tomorrow, I would call Liam Lee and begin the legal process of establishing Silver Sage Ventures. Tonight, I would plan exactly how to recruit my first partner. The baby shower was my final examination, and Violet's friends were my unwitting professors in advanced family cruelty. I moved between them like a ghost, refilling wine glasses and clearing plates while they discussed vacation homes and private schools, and the challenge of finding good help these days. "Violet, you're so lucky to have live-in assistants," said a woman whose diamond tennis bracelet caught the light every time she gestured. "I can barely get my cleaning lady to show up on time." "I know, right?" Violet rubbed her pregnant belly with proprietary satisfaction. "And she's family, so I don't have to worry about trust issues or training someone new. She already knows how we like things done." How we like things done, as if I were a household appliance that had been successfully programmed. Plus, Violet continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially, she literally had nowhere else to go. Her retirement fell through and she was living in this awful subsidized housing. We couldn't just let her struggle alone. The women murmured appropriate sounds of sympathy and admiration for Violet's generosity. I collected their plates and carried them to the kitchen, where I could finally stop smiling. Through the window, I could see Amelia cook in her garden, and the sight of her steady presence anchored me. Over the past month, we'd been meeting every few days, ostensibly so I could help her with yard work that she was perfectly capable of managing herself. In reality, we'd been building the foundation of Silver Sage Ventures with the methodical precision of architects designing a cathedral. Amelia had agreed to lease us her basement and first floor as our headquarters. We'd identified 12 potential founding members, women with engineering backgrounds, business experience, technical skills that had been dismissed or undervalued by industries obsessed with youth. Dr. Janice Carlson had already committed to joining us, along with 2 former colleagues who'd been pushed into early retirement by companies that preferred cheaper, younger replacements. But more importantly, Amelia had become something I'd forgotten I needed, a friend who saw me as I actually was, not as a function to be performed. That evening, after the last shower guest had departed and I'd finished cleaning up their celebration, I found Violet in the nursery, surrounded by gifts that sparkled with newness and expense. "It was a perfect day," she said, not looking up from the mountain of tiny clothes she was sorting. "Everyone loved the decorations you helped set up. And the food. You did such a good job keeping everything organized. I'm glad it went well." Oh, and Darlene? I meant to mention, my sister might visit next month when the baby comes. She'll need the guest room, obviously, but I thought you could help with meals and maybe some light babysitting. She's never been around newborns much. Of course. Another performance in the ongoing theater of my usefulness. That sounds fine, I said. But that night in my basement laboratory, I wrote the final entry in my notebook. Day 32, Violet's baby shower. Overheard her tell 30 women that I literally had nowhere else to go and that they couldn't just let me struggle alone. Her generosity is a performance for an audience that doesn't include me. Isaac nodded along, proud of their charitable instincts. Conclusion. They see my presence here not as a family member in temporary need, but as a rescued stray who should be grateful for scraps. Their kindness is conditional on my continued helplessness and availability to serve their needs. Research phase complete. The next morning, I made coffee at 5:30 as usual, but instead of waiting for Isaac to stumble downstairs, I climbed to the kitchen and called his name. Isaac, could you come down here? I need to talk to you about something. He appeared in his boxer shorts and old college t-shirt, hair pointing in 3 directions, looking younger than his 34 years. For a moment, I remembered the little boy who used to crawl into bed with Simu and me during thunderstorms. Small and trusting and certain that his parents could protect him from anything. What's wrong, Mom? Is everything okay? Sit down, honey. Something in my tone must have penetrated his morning fog because he sat immediately, alert now, searching my face for clues. I need to tell you something important, and I need you to listen without interrupting. Violet appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by the unusual gravity in my voice. She descended slowly, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the railing. Is someone sick? She asked. Is it the baby? Everyone's fine, I said, but we need to have a conversation about honesty. I reached into my purse and pulled out Liam Lee's business card, setting it on the kitchen table between us like evidence in a trial. 6 weeks ago, I inherited money from my Aunt Maggie. A significant amount of money. Isaac's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, calculation, and finally something that looked like hunger. How much money? Violet asked, her voice sharp with sudden attention. Enough that I never needed to accept your basement offer. Enough that I could have bought a house twice the size of this one, or traveled anywhere in the world, or simply continued living independently with complete financial security. Then why? Isaac started. Because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had no other options. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the coffee maker gurgling in the background, the neighbor's dog barking 3 houses down, the sound of my own heart beating against my ribs. You lied to us, Violet said finally. I never lied. I told you I'd lost my retirement, which was true. I simply didn't mention that I'd gained something else. You assumed my desperation, and I let you live with that assumption while I watched how you chose to treat a family member you believed was powerless. Isaac's face had gone red. So this was all some kind of test? It was education, for all of us. I pulled out my notebook and opened it to the first page, reading aloud. Day 1. Violet said, she better cook and clean if she's living here rent-free. I'm not running a charity. Isaac watched and said nothing. Stop, Violet said, but I continued. Day 8. Overheard Violet tell her friend that having me here was like having live-in help, and that I actually seemed to enjoy it. Mom, stop. Isaac's voice carried a warning I'd heard before, the tone he used when his children pushed boundaries he wasn't prepared to enforce. But I was no longer his child, and these were no longer boundaries I needed to respect. Day 15. Violet asked me to reorganize her entire pantry, then criticized my work. That's not how I do it, Darlene. When I offered to redo it, she said I should have asked first how she wanted it done. I closed the notebook and looked at them both. My son, who'd inherited his father's dark eyes but none of his kindness, and my daughter-in-law, who'd turned compassion into a performance she gave when she had an audience to impress. 32 days, I said. That's how long it took me to understand that your generosity had conditions I was never told about. That your love for me was contingent on my usefulness to you. That's not... We were trying to help, Isaac stammered. You were solving a problem. My problem became your convenience, and my gratitude became your validation. But you never once asked what I wanted or needed. You decided what was best for me and expected me to be thankful for it. Violet's face had gone white except for 2 spots of color high on her cheeks. So what now? You're rich, so you get to punish us for caring about you? I'm not punishing you. I'm freeing us both from a relationship built on the wrong foundation. I stood up, feeling taller than I had in months. I'm moving out today. To where? Amelia Cook has agreed to let me rent her guest room while we launch our business partnership. Business partnership? Isaac's voice cracked like he was 13 again. I'm starting a technology incubator for women over 60. Women who've been told they're past their prime, too old to matter, better suited to serving other people's ambitions than pursuing their own. I picked up my purse and headed toward the basement stairs, then paused and turned back. Isaac, I want you to understand something. I don't hate you. I'm disappointed in you, but that's different. You can change. You can grow. You can become the man your father would have recognized. But not while I'm enabling you to treat me like hired help who should be grateful for the privilege. Mom, wait. I'm not going far. I'm literally next door. But I'm done being anyone's charity case. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Amelia's kitchen drinking real coffee from actual china cups while Amelia's laptop displayed our business plan on the screen. We'd been working on it for weeks, refining the details, mapping out our first year of operations. When do you want to make the announcement? Amelia asked. Next week. I want to let Isaac and Violet sit with what they've learned for a few days. And if they apologize? If they want to make things right? I thought about that possibility, turning it over like a stone I'd found on a beach, examining it from all angles. If they apologize, really apologize, not just say sorry because they're embarrassed they got caught, then we'll have a conversation. But the days of me accepting crumbs from their table and calling it a feast are over. Through Amelia's kitchen window, I could see into Isaac's house. Violet was in the nursery, probably wondering how she'd manage 3 children and a house without her live-in help. Isaac was in his office, staring at his computer screen but not typing, his shoulders curved with what might have been regret or might have been anger. In 6 months, when Silver Sage Ventures was operational and our first cohort of women entrepreneurs was developing their innovations, when our success was featured in business journals and our building was humming with the energy of women reclaiming their power, then Isaac would understand what he'd lost when he offered his mother a basement room in exchange for servitude. My phone buzzed. A text from Isaac. Mom, can we talk? I looked at the message for a long moment, then set the phone aside without responding. He could wait. Just like I'd waited 32 days to learn who my son really was when he thought he held all the cards. The difference was, I'd used my waiting time to build something magnificent. Now it was his turn to learn what patience could teach him. If you've made it this far, thank you. I hope this story made you feel something. If it did, consider subscribing. And